been talking about the unspoken heroes of the movement. Those people who God called to be in the movement, somebody who changed the world, yet nobody really talks about them. Nobody really recognizes them. Now, there have been tons of people within the Bible and throughout history that fit the description. And I believe many of us right now fit this description. And that's sort of the whole idea of this series. I want you to understand, you're just regular people, just like these people were. But God did extraordinary things with ordinary people. And I think that's awesome. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
So today, I want to talk about somebody named Thomas. Anybody ever heard of Thomas in the Bible? If you have heard of Thomas, it's usually with a negative connotation. That's the interesting thing. Okay, maybe you haven't heard of Thomas. Have you heard of Doubting Thomas?
Yes.
Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that guy. Now that might seem like a negative thing. Those of you who have heard that term before, Doubting Thomas, that might seem negative to you, but Thomas changed the world. And I believe maybe some of us, maybe there are things about us or things that have happened in our lives that people might look at and be like, you know, maybe they're kind of negative. Maybe you're remembered for something negative or doing something you shouldn't have done or whatever. But that doesn't mean you can't change the world. So today we're going to look at Thomas. Now, Thomas was actually one of the original 12 disciples. You don't really hear much about him in the Bible. As a matter of fact, unlike like we talked about Andrew a couple weeks back, and not much happened with Andrew, but we at least knew who he was and where he came from. We actually have no clue where Thomas came from. We don't know anything about him. We don't know where he was born. We don't know, what his favorite color was. We just don't know stuff. We don't know his favorite type of music. All we know is that Thomas was a follower of Christ, and he had a hard time seeing how things would work out all the time. It was interesting because clearly he loved Christ. He followed Christ for 3.5 years, but Thomas seemed like the guy who always didn't see how this would work out. He was always the guy that would question Jesus like, how's that going to work? Thomas was a notorious skeptic. If he didn't see how things could work, he would question it. We're going to pick this up in John 11:1. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured the perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. Who's heard of her? Yeah? Anybody? So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. That was Lazarus. When he heard this, Jesus said, the sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to the disciples, let us go back to Judea. But Rabbi, they said, a short while ago, the Jews tried to stone you, and yet you're going back there? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks by the night that he stumbles, for he has no light. After he said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he'll get better. Okay, he wasn't sleeping. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but the disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. And here comes Thomas. Then Thomas, called Didymus. Didymus actually means twin, so it's possible that Thomas was a twin. Then Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, let us go that we may die with him. Let me break this down, what just happened.
So pessimistic.
Yeah, okay, this is what just happened. All right, so Jesus just got word that his friend, because he was really close with Lazarus and that whole family, okay? Jesus got word that he was sick, like he was on his deathbed. And they're like, Martha and Mary, his sisters, they're like, somebody please get Jesus here, because we know how Jesus rolls, and we know that Jesus can make this all right. And Jesus hears about it, and he's like, yeah, he's probably going to die. I'm going to go down there and heal him. And then he just waits there for 2 days. After 2 days, Jesus is like, well, let's go down to Judea. And they're like, Jesus, is you crazy? Because Judea was where they just tried to kill Jesus, right? Now understand something. If you were a disciple and your whole life was following Jesus, if they're trying to kill Jesus, guess who's next? Right? Like this is a bad situation for everybody. So I'm sure it didn't take them much time to remind them, by the way, they were trying to kill us back there, right? So Jesus is like, don't worry about it. As a matter of fact, when we go back to Judea, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be so awesome that it's going to like blow your mind and your faith is going to expand. But we're going to go back there and I'm going to wake them up and it's going to be awesome. It's going to expand your faith. It's going to blow your mind. It's going to be so cool. And Thomas is like, all right, let's go die then. Now, understand something. Thomas is a bit hardcore here because he was ready to die with and maybe for Jesus. But understand, he didn't catch what Jesus just said. He was just like, this is going to blow your mind. This is going to increase your faith. This is going to be awesome. I could see Jesus starting to talk about it and him being a little excited, you know. He speaks again in John 14. So everybody get to John 14. He says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God. Trust also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. And if it were not so, I would not have told you. I am going there to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. Could you imagine Jesus telling them this? Like, this is good news, you know? I can see a smile on his face. Like, guys, just hold on. It's going to get good. Verse 4, you know the way to the place where I'm going. Thomas said, Lord, we don't know where you're going. So how can we know the way? Jesus answered and said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So Jesus is in the midst of painting this beautiful picture of a heavenly eternity that the disciples are going to spend with Jesus. I imagine in this moment, Jesus is actually encouraging the disciples, right? Starts to hint to them that he's going to go away. And he's like, but guys, it's okay. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and it's going to be really amazing. And you know how to get there. Just do what you've been doing this whole time. Just follow me. Thomas is like, dude, what are you talking about? I don't know where you're going. Now, don't get it twisted. Thomas loved Jesus. But his desire to understand was greater than his desire to enjoy Jesus. Everybody go to John 20. John 20. We're going to go down to 24 to 29. John 20, 24 to 29. Now, Thomas, called Didymus, twin, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where his nails were, and put my hand into his side, I'm not going to believe that. A week later, his disciples were in the house again. So Thomas has been thinking this way for a week. They had just seen Jesus. If you can imagine all the other disciples, their minds are blown, right? They're just like, oh my gosh, he's back. I can't believe he's back. He came back. And he wasn't even mad at us for like deserting him when people were trying to kill him and stuff. Wow! And he's walking through walls and stuff. Yeah, he did that. It was crazy. 26. A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace. Do you just see what happened? Yeah. You know how creepy that is? Doors are all locked. You know how you'll be locked up in your house, right? Can you imagine? You're just like, peace be with you. And you're just like, Jesus, stop doing that. It's freaking me out, right? This is when he's walking through walls. It's just crazy. Jesus is like, surprise! And, okay, maybe a little less gay, but, Jesus, okay.
That's a good one.
I don't know why, I just see it like that in my head. He's like, surprise! That's just how I see it. Alright, anyway, that's how the Bible comes alive in my brain. Ew. It's got an exclamation point. So he was just like, peace be with you! You know. Verse 27, then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. He was sort of like, come at me, bro. You can't just read the Bible. You have to think about what's going on. You have to put yourself in it, right? Sort of sit in the room somewhere. Okay, you're sitting there with the other disciples. Thomas is over here in a corner grumbling like he always is. And you're excited because you know you saw Jesus, but he just like disappeared, and you're like, I don't know what's going on, but Jesus is back, and I'm excited, man. Do we get to see him again? I don't know, but man, that was awesome. And all of a sudden, he's like, surprise, right? And he just pops up in the room. And out of nowhere, he just goes straight up to Thomas, and he's like, so just, go ahead, man. Go ahead. Come on, do it, right? Now, you know this freaked out Thomas. You know this freaked out Thomas. Thomas wasn't even thinking about anything, right? Thomas was probably sitting there, I don't know, watching Netflix. He was looking for a movie, right? Just go with me here. Just go with me. They had Doctor Who. There you go. Thomas was like, let me catch up on my Doctor Who, right? And out of nowhere, Jesus is like, psh. I heard what you were saying, Thomas. I heard everything. Go ahead. Do it. You know Thomas was freaked out right now. Jesus says, stop doubting and believe. He says, stop doubting and believe. And Thomas, what else could he say? He's like, my Lord, my God. And then Jesus told him, Thomas, you really suck. I'm going to kill you right now. No, this is not what Jesus said. He said, because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. Now, again, Thomas was far from a bad guy. Understand. Thomas wasn't a bad guy, okay? People try to paint him out to be a bad guy, like this guy that was just walking around all the time with his arms crossed, unbelieving all the time. But here's the reality. Thomas walked around with Jesus, practically homeless for 3 years, at any moment ready to die, not knowing what's going to happen. Thomas left everything. Everything he knew, everything he understood to follow Jesus. He was convinced that there was something to this man, and that maybe this man wasn't just a man. But Thomas, and I can identify with Thomas, Thomas was just a skeptical dude. Thomas had to understand how it all worked out. Thomas had some doubts. Thomas just didn't see how it could all fit together and make sense. He knew that there was something to it. He knew that Jesus was someone special. He knew that he needed to have Jesus in his life. He knew that he needed to follow Jesus. But the whole time he just had all these questions and this doubt that got in the way and made things a little more difficult between him and Jesus. He was a skeptical person by nature. I imagine that's his personality. And if you aren't that type of person, you know somebody that's just like that naturally. They just don't trust anything. So now imagine that things made Thomas this way. I imagine that Thomas didn't just wake up one day like this. I imagine Thomas had been through some things that made him question things. Some of you know what I'm talking about, when the very people you're supposed to trust, when the very people that are supposed to protect you are the ones that you have to run away from. The people that are supposed to build you up emotionally are the ones who tear you down. You start to feel a certain way about people. You start to just naturally think people are automatically against you. Is anybody identifying with what I'm saying right now? I know this isn't for all of you, but this is certainly for some of you. And I believe Thomas was in this type of mode. But Thomas still loved Jesus. As a matter of fact, Thomas ended up changing the world. Just like everybody we've discussed in this series. People could have looked at Thomas and sort of counted him out and been like, oh, the negative one, the one that was just always a couple steps behind Jesus and just wasn't really connected with the situation. Because he wasn't like Andrew. If you remember when we talked about Andrew he was almost like, so what are you going to do next, Jesus? It's going to be awesome, isn't it? And Thomas is somewhere in the back like, yeah, let me know when it's time to go. Thomas knew that Jesus was special, but Thomas also knew that there were a lot of things in the world that didn't work out. And he needed to see how it would work out because for whatever reason, he just was naturally untrusting. And Jesus said, forget your doubting. Trust me. And that's what Thomas did. Again, Thomas changed the world. Now, Thomas had a lot of accomplishments. Again, he traveled with Jesus for 3 years. And then he went on to start 7 churches in India. Now this is a big deal because Christianity wasn't really in India. He was one of the main people to bring Christianity to India. The Christians that are in India now have to deal with his legacy. The church is actually super old in India. The church is older in India than it is in the United States or in certain parts of Europe, which is interesting. And a lot of that has to do with Thomas. India is a very religious place. If you don't know much about India, India is a very religious place, and there's a lot of religions going on in India. Now, most of the people who are in India are of the Hindu religion, but there are also many Muslims in India, there are many Buddhists in India, and there are quite a few Christians. You might not have known this, but there are quite a few Christians in India as well. And it's very interesting, the legacy that Thomas left. As a matter of fact, there's this large mountain named after Thomas. It's called St. Thomas Mountain. Muslims, Buddhists, those of the Hindu faith, and Christians actually consider that a holy site because of the legacy that Thomas left. In other words, Thomas led such a God-empowered, awesome, world-changing life that people that don't even believe in Jesus, who he dedicated his life to serving and spreading the word of, have mad respect for him. Thomas changed the world. Thomas didn't have it all figured out, but he knew there was something special about Jesus. So much to the point that he was ready to give his life. This is what we can learn from Thomas. Can anybody relate with Thomas? Yeah? Just like Thomas, we shouldn't be afraid to bring our questions or doubts to Jesus. Here's something that I really want to point out that nobody has ever pointed out. And I don't understand why nobody ever says this. Because anytime you hear, if anybody's ever heard anything mentioned about Thomas in the Bible, it's always negative, and I've never heard this once. Jesus didn't scold Thomas for his doubt. Jesus didn't get in his face and yell at him and go, "Thomas, you idiot." In fact, Jesus invited him to touch his wounds. In other words, Thomas had all these questions. Thomas had all these doubts. And Jesus wanted to answer those questions and those doubts. Here's something you need to understand. Jesus is not afraid of your doubts. Jesus is not afraid of your questions. He's Jesus. If there's anybody who shouldn't be afraid of doubts or questions, it would be Jesus. I don't understand the persecution that Christians go through. And I don't understand the persecution that people that don't even get an opportunity to become Christians go through. I don't understand why little children get horrible illnesses and die slow, painful deaths. I don't understand things. I don't know why he took your grandfather. I don't know why your parents can't work things out. I don't know why you have that sickness. I don't know. I know that the earth is cursed. I know that sin is in all of us and it's screwed a lot of stuff up. But somehow I still know that God is good and that he loves us all, no matter what. I know that he loves me as much as he loves that kid in the middle of South America who is probably more of a Christian than I am, yet has nothing to eat tonight and lives outside on the street. I don't understand these things, but I go to the Lord with these things. I don't just sit there and cross my arms and get bitter. There's no answers there. All those things that you can't work out and figure out, the things that are keeping distance between you and God, if you would just get with Jesus, with those things, he'll start to work with you. He'll start to open things up for you. He'll start to help you understand things. And maybe sometimes he won't, but at least you're with Jesus. At least you're with Jesus. Thomas in that moment was with Jesus. He had a hard time understanding things about him. Jesus showed up in person and said, "Look, here I am." See, when you go to Jesus with your doubts, don't you understand? Jesus wants you to understand him. Jesus wants you to be able to understand things in life and be able to get through life and make sense of things to a certain extent. Jesus knows things that we don't know. And sometimes we don't understand things for a reason. Sometimes we aren't mature enough to handle the things that we need to understand. Does that make sense? This has randomly popped in my head. There's a reason why they wait to tell you where babies come from. Because when you're like 2, you just can't handle that. You just can't. You did what to mommy? Wait, you just can't handle that. You aren't mature enough to understand what's taking place. Did anybody just catch that?
Yeah.
Because that was a really good analogy. Never divorce yourself from the presence of Christ because of those things. Don't you understand? Don't you understand? I've said it many times. I will continue to say it. He chose you. He chose you. He knew every doubt you would have before he chose you. He knew how much resistance you'd give, but he chose you anyways. He chose Thomas. When he saw Thomas, he didn't see doubting Thomas. Now, for the last 2,000 years, probably billions of Christians have called him doubting Thomas and thought of him in a negative way. Jesus never once saw that. You know what Jesus saw when he first saw Thomas? He said, "That's my man for India right there." Man, people are going to respect him so much that people that don't even believe in me will believe in him. Yeah, right? Crazy stuff. I don't know what you're dealing with. I don't know what you're struggling with. I don't know what's getting in between you and God. I don't know what's messing your faith up. But don't let that ever stop you. Pastor said something this morning that I really liked. Think progress, not perfection. Think progress, not perfection. So many times we look at what we should be, and we're like, there's no way I can ever be like that. What's the point? That's not what God's calling you to do. He's calling you to progress. Listen, you'll never get to this point until you're in heaven. I don't have the answers to most of my questions, but I'm in a place where I don't need it anymore. I don't need the answers. Because I know enough of Christ. I know enough of what He's shown me personally that it doesn't matter the other things that are messing me up and confusing me. It's okay. Because He's put Himself in that room with me so many times where He's told me, go ahead, put your hand in my wounds. I don't understand this. I don't understand that. I'm confused about this. I'm angry about this. I'm almost bitter about this, Lord. I don't understand why it has to be like this. I don't know why you took this away from me. But you know what? You showed me your wounds. I know I can trust you. Put yourself in a place where your doubts are with Christ. Don't run away from Christ with those doubts. Run to Him with those doubts. Your life will be changed, and you will change the world. I am so serious. We were put on this earth to change the world. Amen. Stop thinking your piddly thoughts about what this thing is, this whole Christianity churchy thing. It's not about us just getting together and doing random things. We are the extension of Christ on earth. That makes no sense. I know it makes no sense. But we are still the extension of Christ on earth. Why? Because that's what Jesus said. Does it make sense? No, but He's proved it to me.